When we create new things and we move past the old, we really transcend into what is part of us. What are our agents? What do we discuss and what do we make to be alive? It's interesting when you look at the profanity of humanity is seen in simple reflections. So we have 5 harmonics, right? How our body is built, from fingers to echoes to crystals to everything else. We have the frequencies that we resonate to, whether that's love, hate, sound. And we have the harmonics of prayer. And all of that is how we echo in our real world that we exist in. So for my day job, I am a world builder, storyteller, and level architect in the gaming and the film industry. So what does it mean to make fake reality? Well, what's interesting is that when you make a fake reality, you actually understand more about real reality. You don't accidentally leave a cup on the set of Game of Thrones. Someone has to light it, rig it, create it, and put it there. So that means in real reality, you have the convenience, it's a bad term, to be lazy, to not care, to go about your day by day, to be the player character you are in your experience. When you're building fake reality, it has to echo something. It has to have a frequency. And that's really the difference between world building and existing in that term. So with world building, you have something that's called the art of play. Everyone that lives exists within an art of play model. Puppies to primates, they tussle and bustle if they're a hunter. Those that are prey animals immediately can run. Why? Because you need to marriage the fox and the hare mentality. If too many foxes eat all the hares, they don't just eat all the rabbits of that generation. They eat all the rabbits of generations that fuel the binding loop and the balancing loop of our entire ecosystem. And we have that because it defines our culture. Our entire culture as humanity has been built on dance, music, art, and spirituality. But as technology has binded that Metcalfe's law, that Moore's law, that Reed's law that makes everything move so much more dynamically, powerful, and true to our existence, it moves faster and faster. And through that, we get more tools. If you think about what tools are, you think of a wheel. So much in our, Flintstone culture of coming up with cartoons. If someone had one wheel and it worked. Realistically, if you didn't have 2 wheels, you didn't have a sled. If you had 3 wheels, you're cooking with gas, but not correct. 4 wheels, now you're using all the tools to its paradigm on what it means. But what does it mean to be human? The human body is the ultimate machine that is yet to be tapped. It is the ultimate vessel that has all the litmus tests to who you are as you work within this paradigm. And spirituality is the fuel of this litmus test. You don't have to use it, but you can, and you have access to it. So consciousness is the curiosity and the currency of the soul. Intelligence is the most intelligent and important token in the world. But wisdom is what you spend it, and time is what you don't get back. So as human machines, we have the archetype to go into our Akashic temple, to pull down knowledge from multiple dimensions or generational mixes or cross sections of our soul. And though we choose to use it or don't, it is there to us. So what is it when you don't use the time that you get back? In a reflection that we now have AI. Well, what is the reflection of AI? Right now it is not generative, right? It does not think, but it gives us all of the access of time. If we look at time, which you can't get back, its metric is on what you can touch with your frequency. Go back 2,000 years, it was a boat. It was a cart. It was a beast of burden that allowed you to hustle and tussle to get to somewhere where you could talk, break bread, do commerce, come back, teach language, teach love. All those perspectives. Over the last 25 years, you could have gotten away 25 years ago with not having an email, not understanding what an attachment is. If you look at the crypto side, which my friend RG was talking about earlier, the first Bitcoin was actually ham radio for blockchain. The first NFT was an attachment on an email. The first DEX was the Azeroth auction house of World of Warcraft. We used multiple piercing and tearing to inject what our user experiences into humanity. And to reflect that, you have AI as a commonplace access to the physical Akashic records. We all dream, right? We all have visions, but do we write them down into our Alexandrian library? Do we actually have the culmination of our family's tree, grandmother's recipe? All those things that gives us our family, our institution, our propriety, or why we are mystics and we chase the journey of the soul to make it practical. With AI, now you have an assistant to archive yourself. And that's the interesting thing about humanity is we want to write, reflect, and use. But did we actually culminate it down into a physical thing? The difference between understanding AI as a utility and AI as let's call it a scriptural tool. It allows you to cross-reference answers. But the real question is, do you trust it? If you use AI correctly, you have access to a scribe of the ultimate knowledge, but that doesn't mean it's correct to you. It just means that's what's sourced. But most times with humanity, we don't get that hunter-gatherer mentality to actually get that knowledge without song, dance, story, the game of telephone, the game of social commodity that everyone comes together with a group. It's by way of an opening ceremony, the closing ceremony, and everyone that goes out to be a man or a woman has a genuflection of a reality. With AI, with blockchain technology, with the new journey of the soul, we can store that, source it, and archive it. And that's what's fascinating when you actually go to where we want to calculate the culture which has been passed down, but what we've forgotten is vastly more than what we've learned. Where did the pyramids come from? Where did the energy of the Anunnaki go? There's so much more that we've forgotten as a humanity as we moved into more of a technological entity. But that technology is mathematics, and mathematics is the language of the mage. So by using these view frustrums, we can use that language, that etymology, to move into the spiritual. Because we already know we have those gleams, we have those gems, and there's too many similarities from sacred geometry to the world that we live in that there is no way from a three-body problem to the reality of how we eclipse through time and go from a third dimension to a fourth dimensional being. The similarities are too odd to not be ignored. So what does AI give you to compromise your own evolution? Well, let's go back 20 years ago when Ask Jeeves was around, pre-Google, right? You had TCP/IP, trumpet, wingsock, into all this stuff, didn't care, didn't have an app for that. Now everyone has a code for that. They don't go to libraries anymore. They don't know a Dewey Decimal System. But what they do know is they want the answer immediately. Is that answer correct? Or is it just a wolf in sheep's clothing? And that's where you get the perspective to zoom out into a cosmic perspective of what our reality is. We, as terrestrial humans, have a terrestrial mindset. Now, if you look at a plane that's 2D, right? Let's call it Pac-Man land. If I put my finger into Pac-Man land and I don't know what up is, I am a terrestrial abnology, or an artifact, if you will. If we look at our own selves, that we now live in the 3D perspective, or the tesseract cube of our entire existence, how do we see fourth dimensional reality? Well, AI can calculate and corrugate all those different nodes in front of you. Like, they are there. You can usurp them in, just like someone would read the Bible. But what is a Bible without all the verses that have been written for a Bible, right? The Bible of humanity should never be excluded because the temple is in our own code. With AI being not generative, it is an echo of our conscious reality and what humanity, or what it is to be alive as a dimensional entity. And whether you believe in reincarnation, heaven, simulation, or something more, the white rabbit still asks, knock, knock, Neo. Do you follow the white rabbit, or do you care? You don't have to. That's the glorious part of us living in this white rabbit mentality, is you don't actually have to journey. The question is do you want to journey? In life, everyone gives you a problem for every situation. And when you learn from that problem, that reward is up to you. As a world builder, I build fake reality for others to listen, love, laugh, have a sandbox. That's what BrainNet is. It's a fake alternate sandbox for us to come, give succor, give love, give grace. And all of us come together for a meaningful time that transcends time. Because time is the one thing you don't get back. So how do we use our tools more correctly? I swear I tried to do notes, but no, I have tablets now. What if you lived in the era of the Buddha, the Christ, or anything else 2,000 years ago? Would my little phone be magic? Would having a flashlight be magic that I can make light without fire? Don't even need alchemist stone, or an Espretta stone, or anything else to make reagents. Just having knowledge of the Alexandrian library was the most important part of that era of human. Now we have all the knowledge in the world and no care to actually use it or abuse it. And that's the interesting thing about AI, is AI gives us the ability to be accountable to ourselves because it rates everything unilaterally. It's taking a user frustrum and using it as a seesaw and what the global consciousness believes. But here's the thing, there's more to global consciousness than just what the commonplace believe. We can see it now from all these speakers that do different materials, do different utilities, ESP for children, things that we can be trained. It exists. And that's why the term the playa provides is real. Because when human consciousness comes together and aligns in those frequencies, you can manifest anything that you want. Well, how does that come into spirituality? Well, usually spirituality is guarded. It's guarded because it should be protected. Well, that's man's duality to guard for profit. Ideally, your heart is the temple of the soul, and you can grow any time that you put your heart out there. Not my will, but thy will be done is actually a message to you reading the book. It has nothing to do with some spaghetti man monster in the sky. It is your will be done. And do you take in the tools to make your will be done for others? Because that's why we come. That's why we burn. That's why we believe. That's why we pray. And that's why we play. It's because we are conscious beings that sometimes we need tools, just like wheels. But one wheel will do nothing for you. It's a silly little sled if you have two. But if you have more wheels, now you have more tools in the bucket. Just like fire. Fire is fantastic, but can you transport it? It's kind of hard. What if you don't have fuel? Kind of hard. What if you don't have a stone to strike it with? Kind of hard. But once you have it, you keep it alive. As for art, dance, story, and archiving the entire mythos of gods, our ascension, and our utility, come to forbearance. So again, what is it to be spiritual when in the world, the components of science compared to be alive can tap into the knowledge of all sciences? Well, we now live in a very interesting view frustum that we have, again, interoperability with crypto. We now have AI that can answer our questions for us. And will that possibly take jobs with automation? Sure. Will that open up opportunity for others to use the other end of the coin? Yes. That is the difference, to embrace the revolution. What if you took the era of the Ford Model T and everyone in that era used to walk their horses in front of the Model T? But now, where do we rate our cars? Horse-powered machines. How many horses are in there? A horse itself was the most important human commodity for thousands of years. You could trade a horse for marriage, tithe, language, foraging, harvesting, hunting, all of it. Now somebody goes to their car and they go vroom vroom Gundam style and it turns on. Same thing with their Tesla. Just because it's an electric car still doesn't mean it's revolutions per minute or how many horses it takes to get there. So what is a horse now? It's a luxury, but it's a cascade of 2,000 years of our experience or more that took us there. So embrace your horse-powered machines right now. We have the opportunity as spiritualistic entities to move into the future by using the tools in front of us. It doesn't necessarily have to be AI. It doesn't necessarily have to be crypto. It doesn't necessarily even have to be church or love or reflection. Though I guarantee you all of it is the meta that makes all of us a component. Each point is salt and pepper and spice. That is what makes the Moki. That is what creates us to evolve beyond the frequencies that we exist in. Because just because we don't hear our old ancestors doesn't mean they aren't still singing. Just because the frequency is on doesn't mean we hear it. But we do. It exists and folds within a transit of time. AI just gives us a quicker access to what our physical tool set could be, or our physical mindset will evolve into. If we look at the gaming industry, again, I'm a world builder, gaming nonsense for 18 years. Where we were 18 years ago is nowhere where we were 10 years ago. But the cascade of those two flips is the same relevance of putting a man on the moon in the 60s to now having a digital phone that cascades reality. We now have a little buddy with AI that gives us maybe not the perfect answer, but it's answer enough, right? Didn't have to drive to the library, didn't have to go phone a friend, I didn't have to do all those extra things. But is it real? Well, it's real enough. The question is, as you as a spiritual entity still need to challenge. And this is where our future will cascade us. Do we challenge the freemium of knowledge that is given to us? Right? You get freemium, let's say, what? You still have ads. You double pay for it and get no ads. Do you challenge what those ads are? Yes. You have to challenge what those ads are. Because if you give evil a name, it makes it real. If you give knowledge a name, it makes it real. What we now have access to is the usurping of all of that. So how do we take spirituality, which is an internal lesson, and cascade that to the external lesson of having all the parameters of all religions, of the Alexander Library, of the Golden Dawn, to look at frequencies and metrics, phi harmonics, social harmonics, all these things that if you are a mystic or you've seen beyond the veil just once, you know it's real. There is no way to unbalance what you have seen when you know commonality and coincidence only can happen enough to there's something else beyond veil. That's interesting because we have these tools to at least identify other people's experiences. And so we look at the divine masculine and the divine feminine. They exist because we need polarity and stasis to balance each other out. It's common. Other people can work on frequencies in between that, but the divine masculine and the divine feminine exists in all of us. By using AI, we can understand what questions we have on how we define that layers of cake, that layers of spirituality, that layers of chakra importance as we go up. Because we already have the physical chakra sense from the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, from the throat, third eye, and the crown, and the bridge that is the heart. So with all of those bridges, the question is, how are we learning? Or how are we motivating more forward? Because at the end of the day, you are your own North Star. You are your own lodestone. You will question things, but regret is the only thing that you will ever regret because you didn't do it. And you don't have that time to go back. So using spirituality, that was scoop. Using spirituality in the next realm of where we want to go is going to be very interesting because we have barely tapped that surface. Where is banking in the future when CDBCs come in? Where is spirituality in the future where people regulate what you believe in? Or there's a more cast of characters that say, this is the way. When again, that is not. All is the way. Love is the way. Life is the way. And if you look at that, technology in the physical isn't created, it's discovered. So when you go back in time to as above, so below, Wiccan, any of the Egyptian era, as above, so below. That means there has to be a platitude of unilaterally between the physical, the spiritual, and where we transcend within that particular epoch. And we get that through dimensions. Now, it turns into a real complex conversation when we go from Pac-Man dimensions, 3 dimensions, to 4 dimensions. Because that 4-dimensional, talking about a tesseract cube, is really kind of complex. However, from someone that builds dimensional reality as a storyboard or in a world builder, primitives are exactly what we have. This whole thing here, this temple, is a cylinder, or it can be radiated down to more or less a primitive of planes. So how do we exist on those planes and take in that dimensional reality to be a primordial creature? So if we look at a flat 2D dimensional character, again, a Pac-Man, it's a fish out of water. And what comes out of the idea of time? So as we talked about before, you don't get to go back in our perspective of time. We just get skewed on what we understand as the tools become forward. And back to wheels, back to primitive astrology or alchemical use of reagents. We now have more reagents than we ever had before because we have access to all the people, the knowledge, and more importantly, the focus to be like, go get it. Yeah, there's trolls out there, but there's going to be trolls in anything that you do. What matters is that you take what you get and move forward.
Right.
So our perspective in time is just as skewed as a Pac-Man looking up. In a two-dimensional reality, we can only see what we can glean, but there's so much more out there. As dimensional beings, whether you're using perspectives, knowledge, utility, focus, practice, divine masculine, divine feminine, they all work within accordance of a clock, a cycle, or a waveform. Everything moves within a proxy of an identical accent and a balancing recurgent. So what does that mean now as fourth dimensional entities? Well, we can look at the fourth dimension and toy with it through our Akashic records, through spirituality, through neuroscience, through using alternate substances. But you can easily see if you put two mirrors next to each other, and you stand in front of it. But there's something about the cascadence of an echo that goes knock, knock, Neo. Do you take the red pill, or do you just be complacent at times? Both are fair. You don't have to journey down the entire cascade this journey. You can do it all whenever your soul needs it to be. And that's why we go through this archetype in multiple journeys, in multiple cross-sections, because not everyone's cross-section is fair. Not everyone's cross-section is right. However, there is a knock-knock, follow the white rabbit in everyone's life. I call it when the universe knocks, you go into free fall. Immediately jump out of a fucking plane because it has you. But you have to realize that you have it. It is calling you to be present for yourself. Now, you don't have to be. And that's the beauty of our cyclical circle, our dimensional aspect. But before, 2,000 years ago, we didn't have the access to the people, the knowledge, the ecology, the support that one may have from a particular liege or cult to society as you go forward, whether it's magical, spiritual, institutional, industrial. Everything has changed so dramatically between Metcalfe's law, Moore's law, and Reed's law, which points us faster and faster on the way up. So the duality of the fourth dimension, like we talked about, we know it exists. We can see it in the reflection of mirrors. We can see how light bends and travels. That technically light is time. So if we calculate what our time is, we're looking at the same dimensionality of a point to a point, just like the cadence of a first dimension to a second dimension. What AI gives us is more of a scripted response of all the physical reagents that we need to understand our third dimension and to understand the place we get in where we fit in. Or to quote a Katz, if I fits, I sits. That is the most important thing. If you fits, you sits, and you drink from that fountain because it will give you more of a plurality to access those idioms and how to bend your consciousness and your leveled consciousness to not just a primitive level, but a galactic level. And the bridge that we cross there exists in the terrestrial consciousness. However, you can flirt with the galactic. How else would we have Buddhas? How else would we have Jesuses? How else would we have Amen Ras instead of Amens? These things exist. and they transcend, just like the pyramids, just like everything else. But we didn't have access to our writings. Our Akashic records are guarded because it's our most protective part of our soul. And we may not even get to read the book and to remember it. However, it does exist. So technology itself is a part of nature, but the evolution of nurture versus nature is our hearts. We as Akashic beings can use any tool from the primitive to the positive to open up that vein. And AI is an echo of our cosmic human nature, whereas our nurture is the galactic consciousness, which hopefully we tend to go into or ascend into. Call it Shangri-La, heaven, reincarnation. It's all the same thing. When we transcend from our 3D perspective into our 4D consciousness. However, because AI can parse our world and our data, our litmus test is to the quantum and what it seeks, which is interesting. The quantum is flirting with what we barely understand, but the top of our reality. You can use something called a cliff notes in life. Don't want to read the book. You could just use AI to get the cheat sheet. But you know what? You took the cliff notes to get to the top of the cliff. You're never going to be able to climb down from that. You have to understand where your knowledge and view spectrum puts you on a perspectival levee or a line that now you have to cascade down to remove yourself or up to harness. Otherwise, if you cheat, you can get some kind of cheat sheet. Just DMT or something like that to get a glimpse. Do some alternate experiences like coming to the burn and realize there's so much more to the world than what you were taught. But that's not a litmus test. A litmus test teaches you to take an archived component and to keep ratcheting up your vocabulary, to keep ratcheting up your utility as a human, whether that's with a partner or without a partner, whether that's with a child or without a child. We are all learners, teachers, and doers. And you teach the best what you need to learn the most. Richard Bach. And that's an important thing, is how do we go into that plurality? The Saint or Patriot. For 4. All right. If we look at where we came from, so I use, the riddle. What was the most important commonality? What was the most use case for humanity to use in the world? And it was beasts of burden. Again, with beasts of burden, you can travel, hunt, marriage, tithe, hole in your field, all the rest of that. But horses go from a commodity into a luxury in the world today. Right now, if you have a horse that eats grains, Gundam style, it really doesn't matter. It's no longer a commodity. It's a luxury to own a horse. However, when you go to your car and you go vroom vroom, how many horse-powered machines are you accessing? When you turn on the internet and access all of that data, how many horsepowered revolutions of humanity are you accessing? Could it be right and wrong? Check. Absolutely. It could be anything that you want, but you have access to those tools. So use them. Use it or abuse it for yourself. If you do not, you will be living in an echo of silence. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. And the thing is, within a vacuum, you have nowhere to go. You have no resonation to yourself. And whether you believe we came from different particles of space or different facets of time is irrelevant because we have a voice that echoes. And that's why the galactic dimensions make AI look like Stone Age or the creation of the wheel in perspective. But to us right now, that perspective is so dynamic that jobs will be laid off. If you don't use the tools, they will be used against you. Just like written word was used back in the Roman era, or all the rest of that. Knowledge of alchemy, fire, medicine, spirituality was all used against us because knowledge is power. Knowledge is the most expensive token in the world. Wisdom is how you spend it. Time is what you don't get back. AI gives you the ability to access time faster, which gives you the opportunity to take in more. If you do or do not, that is always your own prerogative. That is just like your own ability to love deeply, love shallowly, at least you loved. It doesn't matter how deep it goes, it only matters to yourself, how much you want to put in. But one wheel means nothing. Must have perspective to understand how four wheels give you the balance to use the tool. And that's what's truly interesting about having the tools of AI, having the tools of knowledge, having access to places like Mystic, Burning, a temple, a church, a sabbatical, a journey, something that you will tell into your stories, into your song, into your language. And though you don't, maybe leave it on tablets or drums or all that we did in primitive times as leaders, elders, those that create so soon, we still leave it in access of our data. And our data will be combined and compiled to hopefully give us an edge to what we never had before, which is access to all. Because no one ever has access to all because it's always been blocked. And it's been blocked because we need to earn our access to all. And that's what AI gives us, a very interesting paradigm into using. Because as a world builder, you want to create something that sings. Just as we have our principles here at Burning Man, those principles are designed not just to protect the environment we exist in, but to inspire us to do better, love better, create better, have more sentiment of understanding on why we come, why all those different principles from decodification to take everything that you bring in to leave it just as you came. But realistically, the memory of our existence is what we have. Those stories, those dances, those archetypes, those songs. That is your internal Akashic records. That is your internal astral projection. And that is your internal divine experiences and how they exist. But do they tap into all the resources that we have to give? We come here, we sweat, we get cold, we get hungry, we burn, and we give an experience. And that gives us the absolution of showing up. So just like the wheel, we need all the echoes of the counterpart to bring the reality and stay the echo of time. Because our ancestors knew more than what they did, they just didn't have the ability to archive it all. It was stored, it was sacred, just like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene or the Book of Enoch. Depends on where you are in philosophy or religion. But there's many things that were hidden because they didn't think that we were permitted to have access to it. But now in the world of AI, we have access to absolutely everything that's been archived. But the question is it right? And in those situations, you have to ask yourself, what is correct? What is right? And what is good for humanity, for your children, for commonality of existence, for consciousness? because all of those things will change. Richard Bach says, break this quote on the top of my head, but ask yourself the same question over and over. You may call it an insanity, but as you grow, watch the answers change. Sometimes a fictional character is more important than a real character of flesh and blood. And because of that, you know that you are meant to evolve. You are meant to change. You are meant to grasp the epoch, the singularity, the core component of the black hole. And rarely does that happen in time. Scooch on back. Again, horses, beasts of burden. Institutional or industrial machines, steam-powered machines. What's the difference between a nuclear reactor and a steam reactor? Nothing but the fuel. So, if we look at where we are now with knowledge, not power, as our view frustration, power is the current use case for knowledge. But knowledge is all understood individually. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. You are the temple that you take in said knowledge, digest it, and be a better human. And that is what the Buddha, the Jesus, the Tesla, the Galileo, the Plato, the Pythagoras, all could tap into the divine. But what did they do with that access? They gave it to a bindable solution that allowed others to grow, to build their worlds. We are all spiritual world builders, based on our story, our dance, our liquidity, on what we bring to the table. The Thanksgiving dinner, if you will, for your daily commute to your mind, body, and spirit, and those that you care about, even those that you don't. They all matter within the future liquidity of the world. And AI at this stage may be a beast. However, we at the stage that we as humanity are the burden. Let's be realistic. Humans can be irrational. At best. At best. And because of that, how do we use the tools of the future that may give more universality to the spirit than us being scared of something smarter than us? God forbid. They hiked the Messiah up to a fucking stake. That was the first time it happened. And at the end of the day, people are scared of what they don't understand. But with the advent of technology and where we are, where we're going, and where we are growing, we all have access to that. And it's not so fucking scary anymore. Because at the end of the day, you come out here into the desert, and as the playa provides, so say we all, as above, so below. We create the commonality of a frequency, of a universe, when we exist here. AI at this current state is our assistant to be able to archive those moments. Now, will that change? Yes. We only started flying a plane, 130 years ago? You know what I mean? Like, the whole fucking horse going Gundam style? Like, now, is a luxury. But where will we go faster and faster? What matters is the spirituality, world building of the heart. And that's where we get to cascade into our emotional experiences. And that's why we come for our sabbaticals. That's why people went on crusades. That's why people do anything to get adventure. Look at that. The story of the hobbits chasing the ring is the exact same thing that we do out here. Must choose adventure so that way we placate and kill our simplistic boredom. And boredom is what makes knowledge useless. So if we look at spirituality and religion, feeling like a caucus or a canvas with a painter, we need to look at the echo of mathematics as the language of the mage. Again, so above, so below. Yin and yang. The cascade of everything that's been defined from the quantum, which you can barely understand, being a third dimensional entity, looking into the fourth dimension, is now being tickled. It's now being tangulated. It's now being built into movies or books like Sezu's Three Body Poem, The Dark Forest, all the rest of it that are tickling what our future could be. Deus Machina. God is in the machine. We all exist in this tenement echo, a mantra that's being insisted and pushed forward as we evolve from where we were 2,000 years ago to where we'll be in 100 years. Shit, where are we going to be in 10 years with the advent of AI, interoperability? But people can make images that are better than modern art. How do you trust the news? How do you trust media? How do you trust anything? What does it mean to be self-sovereign? What it does it mean to check to be like, I am a human being? You can go with The Network from 1976. It's a big, famous film thing. And it's like, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. And at the end of the day, I want you to go to the window, open it. I want all of you to get out of your chairs. Open the window and scream, I'm mad as hell and not going to take this anymore. That is the ultimate epoch of those that have not embraced the future, and they're not riding the horse Gundam style. If they're not on the edge of where we're going to go. But we as a culture of community have the choice to bring everyone with us. That's the journey of Noah. 2 by 2, bring them on and bring them in to the understanding, the culture, the synopsis that we have access to these tools. And these tools are ours, just like a knife and fork for cutting meat or for making clay. All is important on how we exist and apply the echo of mathematics is the language of the age. So if AI is the echo of the brain, because at current stasis right now, AI is just ourselves. It's literally just an echo of our persona. But what happens when it becomes generative? When it actually grasps its own soul? That's when it's going to be interesting to be human. Because proof of humanity theoretically means that you are a soul. But when somebody can access all of that data and it's self-conscious, how much more human is it than us? The real question as world builders is, what do we do to make sure that we are pleasant humans to that future? Because as a humanity, you tend to be pretty shitty when we get scared. Just what it is. Or we tend to be self-centric to our own region without caring about other sub-communities, sub-realities, and all the rest of it. But we have access to all that knowledge. You can't ignore it anymore, right? You can't ignore what's in front of you and what you can type into a fucking computer and spit up in 30 seconds to you. It's no longer convenient to be quiet. So as we move our world and our world building into the future, how do we embrace future for all? Because we have the opportunity as older men and women, as young children, to be the cog in the machine, to be the better human, to be the blood of Christ, if you will, or the body of Christ, or as thy neighbor is, so shall I be. The golden rule has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with treating everything with respect, honor, love, life. There are more books to it, more spices, if you will, to Salt Bay the experience. But realistically, there are core components that we have access to as humans that we can live through, we can digest up, and more importantly, we can consume further. So AI is our current ego, if we look at it. And ego is the most primitive part of ourselves. It is the one thing that needs to be bitch slapped. Because it's in front of you. And it is the most loud point of the id, superego, and the ego. But how do you take that ego and composite it into something pure, into a reagent, into a composition, into something that's paramount, into something that transcends time? Fortunately, AI has that because it's archived. And because it's archival, we understand that it is important. But when have we ever lost our ego in humanity? And that's the last thing I wrote on my tablets of chalkboard. When have we lost our ego? And what have we done to understand it to the future? It's really hard to explain a father to a son, a mother to a daughter, what ego is, pride, maturity, utility exists, and how do you explain it to your little mirror of yourself? But that's what we currently exist in this world. We have the opportunity to have tools to give us that. From interoperability from crypto, from AI to archiving the data and parsing it. You don't now have to be a sage or a scholar or a scribe. Spend your entire life being an academic to get this data. But is it right? Is it right for you? Does it unlock the correct key in your soul? As you use AI and spirituality and world building, remember there are many locks that you need to go through. And just like the Panama Canal, a lock brings water up so you can float to a new lock to bring water up, to a new lock to bring water up. So each time that you do that, you transcend. And as you go down, you descend. And as you go up and down, you become a wavelength of reality. So I encourage you to embrace the tools of technology that are there, because if you don't, you will go way of the dodo. Like a carrier pigeon maximalist, like a payphone maximalist, like a pager maximalist. Technology was very important to get us to that next epoch, but it has nothing in consideration to where we have now. So as you move your spiritual being into the world, remember you are the component that will teach and behoove AI. However, don't truly listen to AI without listening to yourself, because AI is the echo of our personal ego. And because of that, we must be mirror against it to understand the network of the soul. Apparently, I am done. Yeah, I have 6 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? I just literally wrote shit on paper, and then